Hello dancers, my name is Roxy and today we're going to be getting into some good old-fashioned nerdy anatomy breakdown here. So if you're coming to this video, you've probably been asking yourself the question of like, how do I stretch my tight hamstrings? Why are they so stubborn? How come no matter how much I try and stretch, they don't really get any better? Or maybe sometimes your hamstrings even feel worse. Maybe they feel tighter, more painful after you stretch. And I'm going to get into all of the reasons why your hamstrings might be tight, because the question we want to ask here is not how do I stretch them, but what is making them tight in the first place, because there are a lot of issues and things that could be happening anatomically that could be creating that tension, and most of them have nothing to do with how much your muscle fibers are lengthening, okay? Usually the issue is coming from things that can't be fixed by let's just keep stretching more and hope it changes one day. So let's get into the few main common issues and what you can do to fix them and start gaining some progress and start to feel some of that unlocked release in your hamstrings. So first main issue here is that it might not be your hamstrings that are unhappy. It might actually be your sciatic nerve, which goes all the way down from the low back, through the back of the hips, down through the hamstring, and down to the back of the heel. So it's going along this whole leg here. And sometimes, especially if you only are in a habit of stretching your hamstring with like flexed feet, your sciatic nerve might actually be feeling really tense. So our nerves are not like muscles. They don't have that elastic quality. They don't like to be stretched. Instead, they need to be able to glide and kind of move back and forth between like the muscle tissues and within our fascia. And sometimes if our sciatic nerve gets a little tight or stuck and then we're trying to just like pull on it as it's going down the back of our leg, your nervous system, your sciatic nerve is gonna be pissed off, and it's all those signals of like pain and tension and tightness and like resistance you might be feeling might actually have nothing to do with the muscles at all, and it might be that your sciatic nerve is actually stuck somewhere. So a couple things to test out here. When you are stretching, let's say like one way to test this out is when you do like a stretch that you would typically do for your hamstrings. Let's say this is a very common one, right? Like stretching, flexing the foot. Where do you feel the stretch? Do you also feel it in your calf? Like when you bend over, are you getting a stretch in your calf when you do this? Does it feel like there's some pain, some tension? If yes, then it probably means it's your sciatic nerve, because if it was really your calf that was getting stretched, you should be able to do this without bending over and feel that same sensation. So try that out for yourself. Another good test here is like, do you get the same amount of stretch in your calf just doing this as you would doing this? If you get a lot more like sensation in your calf when you bend over versus when you're doing the same thing here, it's probably actually your sciatic nerve, because it shouldn't matter what your upper body is doing for you to feel a stretch in your calves. So that's one thing to notice here. Also, if you only stretch with flexed feet, you're also going to be just pulling on that sciatic nerve. So one thing you want to play with here is stretching with your feet pointed as well. But the main issue that we want to fix here is that if your sciatic nerve is stuck somewhere in here, we want to get that nerve to start gliding. We want to get that sciatic nerve to be flossed essentially and have it get unstuck wherever it is. So there's a lot of great exercises for nerve flossing. There's like a million different ways you can do it throughout your whole body. In the video for hamstring flexibility, we'll be doing a few of those things, but a really simple one that you can start with is just doing like point, flex, like flex and bend, point and straighten. But there's so many, we don't have time to get into all those today, but we will be doing some of these nerve flossing exercises in the hamstring flexibility class. So that might be one issue, is that you are only stretching like this with your feet like flexed and you are just feeling the tension all the way down the leg, if you're feeling it all the way down your leg, even into your calves and your heels, that might be an indication that it's your sciatic nerve. Now, a lot of people also struggle with feeling like their hamstrings actually hurt more after they stretch them. They're like, oh, my hamstrings feel like they feel tight, they feel painful afterwards. That's also an indication that you are probably pissing off your nervous system and your sciatic nerve. So the thing here, guys, with stretching, we need to get away from this like no pain, no gain attitude. It's not helpful. If your body is sending you pain signals, like you're getting those signals of like pain, ooh, ouch, because your nervous system does not feel safe and it's trying to tell you to stop. It's trying to tell you, do not go into that range. We don't feel safe here. If your brain and your nervous system doesn't feel like you have control to go into your range and come out of it safely without hurting yourself, it's going to tell you to stop through sending you those signals of like tightness and limitation and pain, okay? Your mind actually controls your flexibility way more. That's not just a matter of like, oh, I'll just like keep lengthening my muscles. If your brain does not perceive that you have control, that you can be strong with your muscles in a lengthened position, if it doesn't feel like you have the stability and control to move through your range, it's not gonna let you. So this is why we also need to incorporate a lot more of stability and strengthening and active stretching into our lives as dancers. If you are only stretching by just like passively, statically hanging out, you're just trying to like press, and you're getting pain signals and you're not listening to your body, and or your dance teacher is making you hold a stretch even if it really hurts, none of that is gonna be helpful. We should only be aiming for like a mild discomfort, what I like to call your edge. Where is that place in the stretch where you can still breathe? You're not in pain, you're not waiting for it to be over. Like, we want to create a sense of safety in our nervous system. Be like, okay, you should only be going to the point where you're getting mild discomfort and then breathing there and allowing your body to show you how far to go, because it's really pointless to try and fight against the nervous system if it's feeling pain, if it's feeling unsafe. So what could be creating that sense of safety? That kind of leads into my next point. A lot of times the tightness that we feel in our hamstrings, let's say that it's not your sciatic nerve, and you're like, nope, that's not me, but my hamstrings are still tight. Another main thing that could be causing that is actually weakness, okay? So this plays into how the nervous system affects our ability to stretch and access flexibility here. Basically, we all have flexibility built into our body. Gaining flexibility is not about like, oh, I just adapted my muscles to grow longer and longer and longer. You are already born with a set length that your muscles will be able to lengthen to. You already have flexibility built into your body. It's whether or not your brain will allow you to access that flexibility. And so a lot of times, what I see in the dance world and just across the board in humans is that a lot of times we are not very strong in our glutes and in our hamstrings. This is something called gluteal amnesia. I also have a video on this that you can check out. But basically, if you have been overstretching and underloading your muscles, that's gonna lead to tightness, because when we just have flexibility, when we're only stretching and we're not also building like strength and stability in our range, that leads to instability. And the nervous system perceives instability as unsafe, because it's not safe. You are at a way higher risk to irreparably damage a muscle fiber if you are just stretching and not building stability at the same time. This is why fixing gluteal amnesia, getting your glutes online and making sure that like when you are working out, you're actually using your glutes and it's not all just in your quads and your calves, is also gonna get the hamstrings to fire as well. So this is why mobility work and active stretching is the best thing that you can do if you struggle with flexibility. It's probably that you're actually weak. And so when you just keep trying to stretch, you're actually making it worse, because you're just creating more instability in the body. And then your muscles feel like they have to try and hold on and grip and they can't let go, or your nervous system, should I say, is not gonna it's gonna feel even more in danger and unsafe and try to hold on and resist and like, be tight. So a couple things that can really lead to the hamstring kind of clenching up and being tight is if our glutes, but more specifically like our hip abductors and like our glute min, max, and med, and our deep rotators like our piriformis, if they're all weak and not really functioning, then our hamstring isn't going to feel safe to release. So this is why I'm such a huge fan of active stretching. That is a huge part of what we're going to be working on in the hamstring flexibility class is actually, how far can you actually go into your range and then be able to get back up? Like, can you activate the muscles, specifically your hamstrings and glutes, in a more lengthened place and have the stability to get back up? We're not going to be doing just a ton of like, kind of hanging out, passively stretching, okay? So basically, your tightness might actually be weakness, and you want to get these muscles back online and really strengthen them up. A third thing that could be causing you to have really tight hamstrings is actually that you might not be targeting the muscle correctly when you're stretching it. This comes down to an alignment or postural issue. So let's say you're like, no, I do my deadlifts, I do my squats, like I know my muscles are firing, I know it's not my sciatic nerve, why are they still so tight? Well, in that case, if you know you're strong, you know it's not your sciatic nerve, it might be that your alignment isn't great. So there's a couple ways that we can think that we're stretching our hamstrings, but we're really kind of bypassing the muscle, and other parts of our body are being compromised for us to still be able to get into a pose. So a great example here is, let's say you can totally bend over, do a forward fold, and you can like drop your head to your shins a ton. But then let's say you tried to stand up, and then it's like, oh, like how come I can't like get my leg up to my head? I just did it standing over, right? Or folding over. So the thing here is that depending on what your pelvis is doing, like look at my pelvis, look at my back. My back is very rounded. You can see my weight is kind of shifted back, and I'm locking into my knees here. So what's happening here is the stretch is actually way more in my back, and my hamstring, which attaches here at my sits bones down to my knee, when my pelvis is tucked and more rounded, these muscles are shortened here, versus when I am shifting my weight forward. Hold on, one other thing that's happening here too, especially if you're hypermobile and you're just like, hey, now here, the stretch is in your knee joint, it's not actually in your muscle. So sometimes it's because we are locking into our knees, we're actually stretching into our knee joint and stretching into our back. That can still give us like, oh yeah, look, I'm flexible, but it's really like your knees and your back that are taking all of it, and nothing's really being stretched in your hamstring. This is gonna show up in your dance classes if you can't get your legs, high off the ground without like tucking and rounding and getting this bad posture, okay? So if that's something, if you get the cue from your teacher all the time, like, keep your back up straight, like stop, like hunching, stop throwing your hips forward to get your legs up, that might be an indication that you're bypassing your hamstrings. So what you can do to fix this in a forward fold and in a downward dog too. I see this a ton in downward dog where people are like, oh, I need to get my legs straight, and then this is happening in their back. Again, there is no stretch actually happening in my hamstrings. It might feel like it is, maybe you're calculating a stretch, but what we want to do is stop prioritizing straightening the legs, especially locking into the knees. Have a bend in your knees so that you can then find more of a flat back. And look what happened in my pelvis. I went from here, really tucked and rounded, to more arched and flat. This is key here, guys, because then the stretch is no longer happening in the knees, it's not happening in the low back, it's actually happening because my pelvis is pulling more against the hamstring. They're actually being lengthened here. So this is what you want to be doing in your down dogs. Really, like, have a bent knee. It's way better to have a bent knee than to just be locking in, and play around here. Like, do you notice a difference in these two? This is where you want to be. Same thing in your forward folds. Just walk your hands back. Keep your weight really in your feet, in your ball of your feet and your toes. If you're leaning back and sinking and locking into your knees, your weight's in your heels, you need to come forward, bend the legs, really arch the back. Like, see if you can get your stomach onto your quads. And then I'm not even really rounding. I'm just kind of like hanging out here. This feels like way more of a stretch than this, okay? So, check in with that. You want to think like arching the back, like booty hole to the ceiling almost. And then we'll play around with this in class, how you can then kind of floss your sciatic nerve in this position and just get more mobility there. So that's one thing to pay attention to. Are you tucking and rounding your back or locking into your knees to get you into a position that normally you would actually want to be working your hamstring flexibility for? Second thing is what's happening in your hips. A lot of times we can bypass our hamstring by not really squaring off our hips, kind of being, again, like locking into your knee, kind of sinking your weight back into your heels, and then like kind of opening your hips and then like rounding through the spine. This is what I see a lot in dancers doing, like pyramid pose here. They're like, yep, okay. I can feel that the stretch is way more in my knee. There's not a ton happening here in the actual meat of my hamstring muscle. So what we want to do here is square off your hips, first of all, already feeling a difference, and then find that flat back and a little micro bend in that knee. Bring your weight more evenly distributed throughout the full foot rather than just hanging back in your heels, okay? And then you can play around here with like flossing that nerve a little bit with flexing and then coming up into the toe. But main key thing here, guys, is like square your hips off. And then again, same thing with the pelvis. Make sure you're not tucking. Have a micro bend in your knee. Same thing goes for if you are here in a half splits. You know, don't just be hanging out here like this. Hips open, kind of sinking, locking into the knee. Like, get that good alignment. See here? And then this is the alignment you want anyways for, you know, flexibility when you dance. You don't want to be rounding and hunching and like, ugh, just to get your leg up. You want to be able to like really, you know, be straight up. So here you can also play around with like, you should be getting the same amount of like hamstring stretch, whether your foot is pointed or flexed. And I really like to play around with both. And then again, I'm gonna reiterate, more pain does not mean better stretching, okay? You don't wanna be in pain. You wanna find that place where you're like, yep, feeling some sensation, especially if you're practicing this good alignment. Like, I get way more of a stretch when I have like this much bend in my knee. And then I'm working on like arching my back more. Oh my God, it is like right through here. And I'm not feeling it down through my calf, my leg, so I know, okay, like it's not my sciatic nerve here. I'm not flexing my foot like this. And breathing here and squaring off the hips. And listening to your body. Even bring some blocks up here. Like, really be gentle here, guys. The hamstrings are not gonna respond well to you just like, rah, and pushing into them. Doing this and breathing here with good alignment is gonna get you, you know, into your splits and where you wanna be a lot faster. And then also in this good alignment too, again, like building that stability and that strength. Ooh, and listening to what your nervous system is telling you. So all of these principles are what I'm combining into this hamstring flexibility class. So all that I ask is that you please be gentle on your body, because once you do these alignment shifts, you're probably gonna be like, wow, this stretch is way more there. If you haven't been working on active flexibility, like it is hard. It's really hard to do, like, you know, be in a pyramid with really good alignment and to be strengthening while you stretch. So consistency here and returning to the practice is what's gonna make a difference. You're probably going to be pretty sore after you do the practice the first time because you're going to be working and strengthening the muscles in entirely new ways. So please just listen to your body, breathe, be patient, and always prioritize good alignment over everything. Now, the one last thing I want to touch on here is something called yoga butt. And unfortunately, this does not refer to having a nice butt from yoga. This means overstretching. This is also known as high hamstring tendinopathy. So this basically means where the tendons of the hamstring attach at the sits bones are starting to get really inflamed and might even have some like micro tears, which we really don't want. So if you get lots of pain, like right under your butt, like right where your sits bones are, I'm trying to make sure my neighbors can't see me doing this. And you're just like, ooh, I feel like pain here all the time. Let me just like stretch into it. I'm gonna have to ask you to stop here. Yoga butt basically means it's a combination of overstretching and underloading. So again, like if your glutes are shut off, if your hamstrings are shut off, if you are not really strengthening up the back body here, you're at way more risk for yoga butt. So all the more reason to bring stability and strength into your stretching. So if you know for sure, if you're like, ooh, I hella have yoga butt, I'm gonna maybe ask you to not do the hamstring flexibility class today. Send me a message and we can kind of go over some solutions. But if you notice, like, yeah, my pain is right here under my butt and I always stretch it, abort, stop doing that. You need to work on really focusing on building strength here and then using other techniques like myofascial release to release some tension in your hamstrings rather than using stretching to do it. I have a great video for myofascial release and I have some great tips for especially using different balls and stuff in your hamstrings, and we'll be doing a little bit of it in our class as well. So guys, let me know if that was clear, if you have any questions, anything you want me to go deeper on. Of course, if you really want to go deep, this is covered even more for the full body in my program, Yoga for Dance Academy. If you found this really fascinating, if you want more solutions to really get to the root of why you have limitations, why you have pain, why you can't get into this certain pose or build strength, you need to understand the full picture. There is a lot more that could be happening under the surface than just simply, what do I need to stretch? As we explored here, it can be all kinds of different things from nerves to alignment to where you need to build strength, all kinds of things. So if you're ready to have like way more clarity and answers and solutions for what your unique body needs, that's what we do in Yoga for Dance Academy. If you want to learn more about that, click the link below. But without further ado, enjoy the hamstring flexibility class. I will post a link for it below. Let's get after it, y'all. I'll see you soon.